Welcome back. All right, so we talk a lot about how in today's National Hockey League, any team can win on any given night. Any team can lose on any given night. Dallas, to me, is one of the ultimate examples of this. Although their overall record's very good, they're 21-9-4 overall. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Nothing to complain about there. And if you look month by month, they're really strong. 5-1-1 in October, 8-4-2 in November, 8-4-1 so far in December. So things are going well. The one thing that's interesting is the consistency with which this team plays is it kind of all over the place. Now, consistency from one year to the next is remarkable. Last year at this time they were 19-9-6. Now they're 21-9-4. 2 years ago they were 18-14-2. So last year we saw a big jump. This year it stayed pretty much the same. Couple points more than they had at this time last year. So very, very strong numbers. But if you look at it, they looked great against the Canucks. They had the huge win against the Canucks last night against Chicago. Meh. Now, it could be said that, well, maybe they play down to the teams beneath them. Not really. Like, it really depends on the game. So a good example is they beat Tampa Bay 8-1 in one game. Looked fantastic. Next game they lost 4-0, again against Tampa. They did win the first at home, lost the next one on the road. And then another example of how it can be tough to measure consistency with them is they lose 6-3 against Colorado Avalanche, and then the next game they win 6-3 against the New York Rangers. It's a resilient bunch. They're able to bounce back from rough games. They play Chicago again tomorrow, so I'll be interested to see if against Chicago they look a little more focused and a little better in that second game of the two-game set between Chicago and Dallas, both in Dallas. But when we look at the scoring on this team, it's interesting too because Robertson's numbers are not exactly where we might have expected them to be. He's at a point per game, which is good. 34 games, 11 goals, 23 assists, 34 points. But coming off of a 100-plus point season last year, that'd be considered a little bit disappointing, right? Pavelski, 34 games, 14 goals, 19 assists, 33 points. If I tried to say anything bad about Pavelski, it just wouldn't. I don't think the words would come out of my mouth. Rope Hintz, 32 games, 14 goals, 18 assists, 32 points. Again, point per game for him. Matt Duchene, after a rough start, he's really turned it around. 33 games, 11 goals, 18 assists, 29 points. One of the best value contracts on this team. Heiskanen, 34 games, 4 goals, 20 assists, 24 points. Very solid season for Heiskanen. Has he been consistent? I don't know that anybody on this team has been consistent game to game, but there's enough depth here that when one guy has a rough game, another one should be able to make up for it. Sagan's an example. 34 games, 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points. At times invisible, I should say, and at times he's really driving the play and looking quite good. Jamie Benn had a goal last night, but he's still sitting with 6 for his first 34 games, so that's low for him to go with 17 assists for 23 points. The 23 points are fine. Jamie Benn is, at a stage in his career where we do expect the numbers to be coming down. And then you got Wyatt Johnston, 34 games, 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points. I think Johnston's underperformed to this point in the season, and I would not be surprised to see his numbers get a lot better from here. And then there's the goaltending. Goaltending has been good, not necessarily great. So Ottinger and Wedgwood, Ottinger's 11-7-2. Surprisingly, Wedgwood's 10-2-2. Ottinger, 901 save percentage, Wedgwood at 902 save percentage. Now, quality starts. Looking at quality start numbers, Ottinger, 47.6% of the time he's started, his save percentage has been 900 or higher. And in Wedgwood's case, 46.2% of the time. Those numbers are low. By NHL standards, those numbers are low, and I think they're lower than either goaltender would want them to be. And so this is a team that, if you want to make the argument they're a contender, you can point to their record, you can point to some of the wins they've had against contending teams. If you want to state, they may not be a contender, you can point to some of the middling stats here and there, and to some of the nights where they haven't necessarily looked great, right? But they're in the running for first in the division. So I wanted to look at their individual stats too. Goals scored per game, 3.47. That's 8th in the NHL. The one that surprises me a little bit is the 3.09 goals against per game, which is 14th. This is a team that's prided itself on keeping their goals against down, being in the running for the Jennings Trophy for the lowest goals against average at the end of the year. And so that's a number that I definitely think can come down. But Pete DeBoer was brought in for the offense. Maybe this is part of the DeBoer effect where the defensive numbers aren't quite as good as they were because there's more offense being coached. Maybe. Now their power play, 22%. That's 13th overall in the NHL. It's been hot and cold. Again, it's Dallas. Their penalty kill's been pretty remarkable. 86.4%. That's third overall in the NHL. So they're top half in power play numbers, in goals against per game, but those are both numbers you can look at and say they could make some improvements there. Their shots, they're getting 30.2 shots per game. They're allowing 30.6 shots per game. So again, you can factor in like high danger, low danger, and all that other fun stuff there. But I think they're doing a good job, generally speaking. And again, it just feels like there are some mediocre games that are in there as well. But it is remarkable how solid their record is overall. And one of the reasons I wanted to highlight Dallas is simple. It doesn't feel like we've seen a consistently great game from them, and they're still sitting near the top of the division. They're still a team that's 7-2-1 in their last 10, and I don't think they've played their best hockey yet. Their hits per game, very low, 12.87 hits per 60 minutes. That's 31st overall in the National Hockey League. Their block shots, 14.21 per 60 minutes. That's 24th in the National Hockey League. So those are numbers that I think we want to see get a little bit higher. Again, it may just be the coaching style of Pete DeBoer. He doesn't find that as important as, say, John Tortorella might. So those numbers end up being lower. Where things really get interesting with Dallas is when you get into numbers that just feel very unlike the rest of the league. If they lead after the first, they're 4-2-1. Not a really strong record. If they're leading after two, though, they're 14-2. So Dallas leading after two periods, very good chance they're going to win that game. If they're trailing after one period, they're 7-6-1. That's a very solid number. If they're trailing after two, they're 4-7-1. So again, even though they've lost more than they've won when they're trailing after two, 4-7-1's not bad. So this team's capable of comebacks. They're also capable of losing leads. Because if they score first, their record's 9-2-3, which is okay. You know, you only have two regulation losses. But when they're trailing first, they're 12-7-1. So it is interesting that they've allowed the first goal 20 times out of their 34 games played. So if Dallas starts the game on time and gets some more first goals and gets that early lead, they can bring down their goals against and improve their power play just that little bit. We could be talking about a Dallas team that ends up winning the West at the end of the season. They have that potential. It's definitely there. So it can be more frustrating on those nights that maybe they just don't have it clicking. Again, last night against Chicago, maybe it was just it's Chicago. They kind of, let up. They take their foot off the gas, this kind of thing. But they're fascinating to watch. I have no idea. Like, this was my prediction for the Stanley Cup final this year. I took New Jersey over Dallas in the final. New Jersey's at least above the playoff line right now as I'm recording this again. It was touch and go there, and it still kind of is. But Dallas is pretty comfortably in the playoffs. And I still think that if everything clicks for them once we get to the playoffs, they could very well end up coming out of the West. But that being said, the question I would ask to people watching this video is a simple one. Are the Dallas Stars a legitimate contender for the Stanley Cup in 2024? Do you look at Dallas and say that's a team that could absolutely win it all? Or do you look at Dallas and say, well, they're great, but... And then, insert reason why you don't think Dallas ends up winning a Stanley Cup. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I was looking through which teams I'd done videos on and which ones I hadn't today, and I was like, man, I haven't talked about Dallas. There's a little bit of stuff here to talk about with Dallas, because, again, they can look great one night, and they can look kind of pedestrian the next. But even still, they're getting the results. So the fact they're 21-9-4 is remarkable. And so if they really do start getting that 60-minute game going, if they do find that consistency from game to game, they could end up winning the West, and they could be very, very dangerous come playoff time. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.